we're going to do a kind of emotional weather report to start out because, not only are we at the tail end of the hurricane season in the Gulf and the Caribbean and the Atlantic, but we're in the emotional hurricane season of the election. And I don't think it's escaped your attention. Rupert Sheldrake, who's a great kind of mystical biologist, he talks about that we're always in some kind of force field. He called it a morphic field. Morph just means it's changing, but and I think we're in quite a tumultuous one now. We're seeing on one hand places like Asheville and being destroyed unbelievably by this hurricane. The hurricanes that are rolling in. There's another one. I think maybe it's Oliver or something is out there coming in. If you pay any attention, you know that that the climate is trying to reset itself. It's not personal, but we've overheated it, and so it's given much more force to these hurricanes. And so that's part of this morphic field. And if you're at all aware of anything, you're aware that there's other places devastated by other things, war mainly. There's a sort of people are fleeing drought in Africa, and part of the refugee folks and the medical folks that we send money to every month from this community because of your donations. Well, they're doing what they can. They're doing what they can, but it's a big dark scene in lots of places on the earth. But there's light too. So we're going to start with maybe a guide to go through this emotional hurricane that we're probably for the next couple of months. November 5th won't end, unfortunately. It would be a blessing if it did, but I think this election hurricane is going to go on for a while. And how do we work with that? How do we use what we've learned and what we can support with each other to go through that? Yeah. So first, a little emotional weather report, and the whole talk will probably end up on YouTube as the narrow path through darkness into the light. It's a little hard to put on YouTube, but I may shrink it down. But that's the basic image, and we'll come back to the screensaver for our pals on YouTube at some point to show them that picture, which is the paint is hardly dry on that picture. And if you've been to Loose Leaf Hollow, or if you've seen the past picture of Jesus that we use for the Wisdom Jesus, Cindy overall is she's a professional artist. She has shows every year. She's brilliant. And that was her latest picture that she just finished out at Gethsemane, out at the monastery, sycamores, radiating that light. And it just fit with the idea of finding a narrow path through the darkness, into the light, into the healing. Okay, so we'll show it again at some point. But first, a poem, and this poem, AI is great, but sometimes it has a mind of its own. So this poem was released like at random, I think on Wednesday this week. It was meant to be Monday's poem, but it'll all work if you didn't see this particular poem. And then Monday we'll have a new poem. Sort of we'll be going into today, but this is called "Let Stillness Be Your Guide." It's had the poem, didn't have the title. Sometimes they have the title poem. So let me read this through to you, and then make a few comments, and then we'll see the screensaver and work on the path through all this. Now, this will be echoey to some of you because I'd say maybe 2-3 years ago, as a group, if you're around then, we worked with Miriam Greenspan's healing through the dark emotions, and she was talking about grief, despair, and fear. Since I sort of call them the Holy Trinity of of the dark emotions. Well, here's a little bit on that, because you could be feeling any of these or others right now. And so how do we go through the darkness into the light and into the healing? This is fierce grace. You know, if you have no idea about grace, well, you'll be getting some words on that. But grace is what the universe showers us with. There's friendly grace when everything breaks in your direction. You just, you know, Eckhart Tolle was absolutely broke, living in the Northwest, and had no money. He wanted to sit down and write The Power of Now, but he had no money, and he bought a scratch off, and he got $2,000 of the scratch off. It was his last dollar. He said, "Well, you could call that friendly grace, but dark emotions, uh, grief. The women here did a grief ritual around the fire pit. Powerful." Grief, despair, fear is a holy trinity of dark emotions. All these are perfectly legitimate human emotions. Don't get the idea that when we call them dark, that they have to be bad or evil. They're fierce, but they're, a grief, a fear, and despair. They're all perfectly legitimate human emotions. We're humans. They come up. As Rumi concluded in his poem, The Guest House, which some of you know, maybe by heart, Rumi says at the very end of this, he starts off, this being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival, a joy, a grief, a despair, some unexpected visitor comes knocking on your door, welcome and invite them in. And at the end, he says, be grateful for each has been a guide from beyond. So these are guides in a way. This fierce kind of even morphic field we're in, it has guidance in it, but you have to know how to work with it. And using the tornado the hurricane metaphor, all the other tornadoes of afflictive emotions are spawned by these three Category 5 hurricanes: fear, grief, and despair. In one of the recent storms, there's like 160 tornadoes that spun out of them through Florida. And so there's a lot of spin-off darkness, and you can give names to the emotions, but it's energy. It's all energy. All the other tornadoes of afflictive emotions are spawned by these three Category 5 hurricanes: fear, grief, and despair. Plus the typical storm surge of destructive commentary that always comes in their wake. So, the energy of afflictive emotions is powerful enough. It grabs your attention. But then, just like when the hurricane rolls through, then the storm surge comes in from the ocean, which is at first always when we're dealing with hurricanes, you think you're through it, but then the storm surge comes in and you got 13 feet of water or something like that, wipes you out. Well, the storm surge dealing with human emotions is all the commentary in our head about the emotions, about the pain, about the affliction, you see. And that's something that we can learn to deal with. We can learn how to deal with the initial pain of the emotion, and then the extra pain, the non-legitimate suffering, because it's extra, of all the commentary in our heads. Something wrong with me. Who doesn't think that from sometimes all the time? There's something wrong with me. That's commentary. You're depressed, you're in despair, there's something wrong with me. And all the other commentaries. Never get anything right. Nobody loves me. I've had all those. Okay. Fear, grief, and despair, or any of their offspring, can turn you into a victim or a witness. Hold both of these terms here for a minute. When these storms roll in, it can turn you into one of two things. You can be a victim of the storm or a witness. And there's a world of difference between the two. So hold these, literally hold these in your hands. You can become a victim of these emotions or a witness. And there's a world of difference between the two. It's the difference between reaction or response. It's the difference between mind and heart. It's the difference between thinking and awareness. Whether you become a victim or a witness. Let me repeat that again. It's a difference between reaction or responding to the storm. It's the difference between what the mind does with it or what the heart does with it. It's the difference between thought and awareness. You know, Ellen Watts, who was a kind of spiritual guru and entertainer in the 60s, I liked Ellen a lot. If you want to understand Taoism, for instance, Ellen is the guy to go to. Look up some Alan Watts. He's totally entertaining, and he really understands Taoism. He lived on a houseboat. He lived on water, which is what Taoism's all about. But he had a little quip that is pure wisdom. He said one time, he said, the mind is a good tool, but a bad master. The mind is a good tool, but a bad master. Yeah, I think that's real wisdom. In a poem I wrote called The Hokey Pokey, the first turn yourself around thing is you make, during the time of meditation, you make awareness the master and thinking the servant. Thinking is a good tool for time and space, transactional things, keeping the roof over your head, buying groceries, you know, sometimes doing incredible things like inventing Zoom. Well, great, here we are. It's a good tool, but when you're dealing with afflictive emotions, when you're dealing with big issues, it's a bad master. As a matter of fact, the mind, when things of real importance, relationships, your relationship to another person, to your family, to the great mystery of the divine, the mind gets in the way, you see. It's a bad master. Then that's heart material. That's why we call this heart to heart, not mind to mind. Because the heart can deal with the deepest issues, say. And the last paragraph or last stanza of this poem is the difference between the difference a stable spiritual practice can make when the hurricanes of emotion roll in is immense. Because they will roll in. To be a human, you are going to get these hurricanes of events, of emotions. Last week, Debbie Mahoney shared that she's got a cancer diagnosis. Some of you have been through this. You know what that's like. And she was here this weekend leading the retreat. She has a stable spiritual practice. She's been working at it day in, day out, week in, month out, year out, for decades. And it makes an immense difference. You know, I say let stillness be your guide. Both the frozen rabbit and the mountain are still. You know, when rabbits sense danger or anything potentially painful, they'll freeze. They may run if it's possible, but they either run or freeze. Rabbits don't usually fight anybody. So that's what happens when things come. You know, imagine somebody calling on the phone telling you have cancer. You know, I don't care how long you've been practicing. It's that kind of, you know, and immediately you sort of freeze up. So rabbit is still, because if I'm still, maybe they can't find me. If I can't run, it'll be still. But a mountain is a different kind of stillness. I was here with Debbie for 4 days with some other familiar faces. One of them on with us now, actually, Mary Wright. And there's a way to sit like a mountain. The mountain doesn't care about the weather. It's okay. Storm, snow, whatever. And you can get that ability. And as a matter of fact, that's sort of my not so hidden agenda. So give everybody experience and then also encourage you, not just to sit with us here, but to actually work on getting a stable spiritual practice. It can be, Buddhist, it can be Christian, it can be Sufi, it can be Hindu, doesn't matter. Somehow they all have this meditation practice and they have different flavors, but essentially you learn how to sit like a mountain. A mountain stillness leads to the silent land of the witness. That's the last line in the poem. A mountain stillness leads to the silent land of the witness. Again, you can be a victim or a witness. To be able to go through what Debbie's going through, what some of us have gone through, whether you mess up your relationship with your husband, wife, or a dear friend, or you lose your job, you can go into victim mode or you can go into the witness mode. And the witness mode, it comes from cultivating this sense of silence and stillness, no matter what. And you can do that. And I'm going to give you some help today. This exists. That's why the silent meditation is right in the center, sort of the cream filling of this Oreo kind of package we have. You see, some talk, and then the community thing, which is always amazing. But none of it happens without the stillness in the middle and the silence. So I'm going to put up the screensaver now for those of you guys on YouTube so you can see this picture just for a minute. And even if you were watching it, maybe, whoops, let me get this off for a minute. Maybe you missed something in this picture. So I'm going to try to share it again with everybody so you can take a really good look at this beautiful picture. And for our folks on YouTube as well, who are catching this later. This particular artist, Cindy Overall, she has the ability to work with light and dark. I suggested a title for the picture she probably won't use, but I said, I'm going to show it today. I hope you don't mind. And I call it the narrow path. Now you might see that's this narrow path down at the very bottom of your screen, and it is very narrow. I called the talk today the narrow path leading through the darkness into the light, into the healing. And what strikes you is the light at first, the light coming from those sycamore trees. There is a narrow path. Jesus talks about it. He said there's a narrow path. Buddha is the same way. He talks about it. And they were both talking about, working with, there is a way through and out. And there's not just one way, but the way I know, the way that I'm passing along is the ability to meditate. So anyway, there's Cindy's great picture. She's a local artist who did the Jesus picture. She did another picture of Gethsemane I have hanging in the kitchen of Loose Leaf Hollow, and she did a whole series on Ukraine. She does a show every year in Louisville. She's really great. Well, okay. Let's get this off the screen. Okay. All right. So let me just lead into this a little bit by going back. Some of you, especially if you weren't here in the last dialoguing with Spirit on Saturday, I did the 8 Beatitudes of Jesus that I rendered into American English from the Aramaic. So I'm going to read you 2 of them, the first 2 of them, and it will connect with what with what we're talking about, the narrow path here. Uh, and this may seem odd to you if you even remember. Uh, Blessed are the poor in spirit, and blessed are those that mourn. If you even remember those, have them in any kind of learning memory. These will sound a little different, but I think it really catches the spirit of what Jesus was talking about. So here's the first two, and then we'll link it to the meditation period coming up. The narrow way is right here. The first beatitude, so-called, ripening of the humble, who know in their wisdom that sacred breath is their only possession, and that in this poverty they are fully empowered. Ripening are the humble, who know in their wisdom that sacred breath is their only possession, and that in this poverty they are fully empowered. So it's the power of the breath. It's in all the traditions. You'll find it. Find a tradition that doesn't talk about it. I'd really like to know, because I've surfed through them all. I've practiced with many. It always gets on if you do yoga, the breath, and what Jesus was saying. First of all, right now, the humble people who have their feet on the earth, humus, the earth, who are grounded. This is where the path starts, to be grounded. And now I'm sitting in a chair, and my feet are on the ground, and my tush is on the cush here. It's on the cushion. Those are 3 points. Now you can be sitting cross-legged, which I did for many years, which the Buddha started with 500 years before Jesus. Jesus didn't have any chairs either. People didn't own chairs in those days unless you were very rich. So they probably sat on the ground too, to be grounded. And within that, the sacred breath, it's really the only thing you can't lose. And it's sacred because it's your only possession. They can take anything from you, as a hurricane can. All of a sudden you got nothing. Well, you still have the sacred breath. And the breath is the link to the sacred. When we go into meditation, we're leaving the quotidian daily transactions alone. We'll do 20 minutes maybe. And for that time, we're leaving all that stuff alone, the transactional level, and we're doing this vertical level of we're going down from the mind to the heart, where we can just rest in the heart, because of the sacred in us, the kingdom within us that Jesus talked about is found in the sacred heart. And breath will get us there. Now, notice in our physiology, our human material heart is surrounded by the lungs. It's surrounded by the breath, you see, for a reason. That's built-in symbol that breathing can take you into, not just, and we'll be using the physical heart to actually lead to what in the Catholic tradition was called the sacred heart. In the Buddhist tradition, it would be called the bodhicitta, the noble heart, the awakened heart. Every tradition has a different way of languaging that thing that is within us that we really long for. We think we long for sex, drug, and rock and roll. We try them all. And then it still doesn't do it. And then maybe you decide, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. Okay. So I'm going to use, I think I can put it up here. I'm going to use what I call a heart-to-heart breath, which I've worked with for some times, and I've worked with versions of this with you. See if I can find it here, just so we'll have it up while we're working with it. Shoot. There we go. Okay. It's tricky here. Sorry for a minute. Yeah, I've been working with this for a while, and let me put it up so you can take a look at it. Sorry for this. The beauties of technology. Sometimes they're tricky. Okay, this is what we'll do for a beginning as an intro for the set. Yeah, we were sitting quite a lot during this 4 days, and this kind of breathing is it's we're going to work with it for a few weeks. It's a bit like a Swiss Army knife of the breath work because you can use it in a lot of situations, on the fly, really devastating situations. But I'm just going to work with it in one way today as an intro to doing this thing that sometimes seems impossible, to go from being all caught up in the mind to go down to um, the heart. Okay. And I'll have a little more information on this tomorrow because this will be on the Monday mailing. But this comes from actually the Sufis were the first one to put me onto this because that's they're really focused on the heart. They kept the heart as focus. But this is for moving from the mind to the heart, which is what we're trying to do uh, as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible in the beginning of meditation. Because you can sit for 20 minutes thinking about stuff. Well, why? That's no different than normal. If you can drop down into the heart and actually rest in the natural great peace and the wisdom and the sacredness for 20 minutes, that's a whole different thing. So this just has three parts, and I'm just going to lead you through it. Uh, uh, and let's just practice a little bit, and then I'll hit the bell, and you'll have time to do it for yourself. Just inhale slowly through your nose. And filling up, you fill up your chest, your lower belly. You just inhale slowly through your nose. All right, you can just let it out. That's the first step. Um, and so if you inhale slowly through your nose and then you hold it, when you get to as full as you can get, you hold it for 4 heartbeats, and you will, when you hold your breath at that point, you will hear your heart beat. Then we're bringing the heart into it, you see. And if you listen to the 4 heartbeats, if for some reason you don't feel or hear the heart beating, well, you can go to the third one. It'll go eventually. Well, then you exhale through fully through pursed lips. Now, when you purse your lips, let's just breathe in through the nose, fully, slowly, no hurry, but you're really trying to fill up your entire inner cavity with good, fresh air, and then hold it for 4 heartbeats. And then through pursed lips, like you're blowing out a candle, just let it slowly, all of it go out. And then naturally, the breath starts coming in again through the nose. Now, the nose mouth thing uh, is a technique that will uh, turn off your sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and and then bring on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is calm, a sense of calm. It might not happen right away, but we're going to do a few breaths, and that really helps you just settle in. And on the fly and in really crunch situations where you're anxious or panicked or afraid or any version of that, this kid will work with. We'll talk about that next week probably, but for now, it's a really, uh, I use it every time I start to do my sitting. I used it all of these last 4 days, to bring in. And then, when you actually make it to the heart, uh, you just rest there. And then you'll find yourself up here, working on something with the mind. And when you notice it, you can just bring yourself back with one of those breaths. You don't need to. And once we let go of the heart to heart breathing, you should just breathe through your nose very calmly. And there's no special technique. Just let the breath come and go through your nose. But when you find yourself all tangled up in something, it's a good way just with a single breath to bring yourself back. Holding it for 4 heartbeats. And then, so it's a kind of come back in uh, method too, if you need it. If you just notice you're thinking, well, maybe sometimes you can just the noticing is enough, and then you're back, just resting. Thinking is one thing, resting and awareness, totally different thing. Okay, so let's give it a try.